Hi, I'm Andrew Armstrong and welcome to the Back Office Teardown Lab. Today you get to see me chilling out and assembling some PCBs, and I'm going to be assembling these. These are a new PCB. They're on my website right now, and basically they are an Atari Diagnostic cartridge. So there's a most people don't really know about this if you haven't owned an Atari, but it does actually have a cartridge port on an Atari ST, and it's pretty underutilized. I had one back in the day with a cartridge for STOS, for recording audio samples, and more recently this year I required a hand scanner so I can scan into an Atari ST, so ooh, fancy tech. Now, something that's useful, of course, is a tool to aid diagnostics in the machine, and there was a diagnostic cartridge that was available to Atari service engineers back in the day, and if you follow any of the repair manuals, because my Atari ST broke earlier in the year, and it always keeps referring to this as part of the procedures. Put in the test cartridge and test this. Put in the test cartridge and test that. And if you don't have the test cartridge, you have to skip some of the procedures or make up your own, and you get nowhere, trust me. So you can buy these. Other people do make these, and they make neater ones, smaller ones, one with switchable BIOSes on them, to load up the different versions. I don't. I have a simple one here, and I'm selling it in different varieties with the ROM pre-programmed onto these ROM chips, and this one is for a regular Atari ST and Mega ST, and this is for an STE or Mega STE. It's that simple on these, and there are other variants. You could always ask me if you want a special ROM blown on there, and I'll show you really what I do. They are time consuming to assemble because there's a lot of solder joints, but I'm going to make up some while I talk, if you don't mind. I have a bunch of PCBs here. You can see there's many to do, and it's all part of a process. And I'll just show you the parts while I go through it. Well, actually, before I go through it, so you know what I'm up to. And it's a case of soldering on these sockets. I've got some new sockets here. And then you have to program the chip. And I'll show you some. These are to be erased. It says to be erased, so these are ones I've cocked up. Hard to get out the pack, but these are interesting chips. They're basically UV erasable EPROMs. So they're erasable EPROMs. You can see I've got 1 and 2 written on these. So these are obviously a bank, a low and a high. And the problem with these is that you can only program them once without a UV eraser, because you need a UV eraser to erase them so you can use them again. So if you make a mistake like that, then these are kind of dead in the water until you get an eraser. And I have literally just ordered an eraser so I can erase these and program them with a new firmware so I can put them back on. So I'm waiting for that. Now, some people have asked me if I can sell these without the chip, or because they're going to put their own chip. And there's another thing I want to show you, which is really cool, is that you can see this takes 4 chips. So a lot of the ones you'll see only have the 2 chips that are the minimum, which are the ROM 4 bank, but I actually include the ROM 3 bank because you can do more things with them. So if you follow my Discord, links somewhere down below, you'll see that Chrissy on my Discord channel has actually programmed, I think it was called Buggy Boy, I know, a game I hadn't played, but it looked pretty cool, onto his, and he used 4 chips. So you can utilize the full address area if you do that. But one of the reasons my cartridge is this size is because I intend to use it for Atari ST cartridge port project. So it's not just for the ROM, because if you want just a diagnostic ROM, go and buy mine would be great, but you might find better ones out there, or ones that are a bit neater, and they just do that. Mine sticks out a little bit longer because it's got the extra 2 chips on them. But if you're interested in doing some coding, because we've been downloading C and playing with the Atari ST coding, so that we can actually build our own hardware and interface it to the Atari ST. So I'm talking things like maybe you might want to build a real-time clock, maybe you want to attach an Arduino, maybe you want to attach a Raspberry Pi, who knows, or an ESP Wi-Fi module. I know I've got RetroNets for that purpose, but maybe you might want to try one with the cartridge port. There's definitely a lot of scope for this. I've actually got this robotic arm kit, which I've used actually. I did try that with a contemporary robotic arm kit you can buy, and that lets you program the robot arm from the Atari ST, which is really cool. That works super well. So you can actually probably blow those ROMs on here. The other thing you can do, which I've noticed, is oh no, did that bit wrong, is that there are Ripper. There was something called the Ultimate Ripper back in the day, which oh my word, having trouble with this guy, bent a pin, which was about like an action replay for the Atari ST, something where you could do memory saves, memory dumps, that sort of thing. And I think it worked, because when you reset an Atari ST, I don't think it reset necessarily all the memory. So as the cartridge is the first thing that's checked before it kind of loads up from the disk, what I think happened is, if you have the cartridge and you had the Ultimate Ripper in there, it had a switch on it, I think it's off basically. You have it in the cartridge port but off, and then what you'd happen is you'd hit reset on your Atari ST, whilst at the same time you'd switch that switch, or you'd switch the switch then hit reset. So what would happen is when your Atari ST would power back on, it would load from the cartridge port, and then that card had all these software on it for doing hex editing and reading from the memory locations and things like that. So it let you save game states and things to disk. So I guess the benefit of that is, if you'd already got past the copy protection, you could just then save your game without the copy protection check from that point on. So it's kind of cool in many respects. So if you imagine, if you're doing debugging, Atari ST development, it's going to be a really useful cartridge to have. So again, that's something that we could probably get working on this, because the difference really in that is we don't have that switch, but you have full access to all the hardware here. You can we'll just work it out. We'll cut the traces if we need to. We'll fit the switch on there. We've got additional ROM banks on there. Again, I'm not quite sure what people have been up to, because a few people on Discord have been playing with it, but you can actually interface to all of the cartridge pins. I'm double checking now, just eyeballing it. Yeah, every single pin here is going to somewhere on this PCB. So if you wanted to, you could actually just solder to the ends of the pins, because it doesn't go right in. I've got one here which I've inserted these because I test these. You can see that the marking on the PCB, might just catch it in the light, goes to about here. So you've got this much to play with if you want to solder just straight onto the end. So there's a really good scope for playing around with. So I'm just going to solder some of these. So I'm really, at the moment, kind of confused really on how much of these to make and in what variant. So you've got some options. I've got some options, and now I'd want to sell them. So that you can either sell them with or without these socketed chip holders. So you could just have a raw PCB. For me, there's not really much value in selling a raw PCB. It would be quite expensive for what it is for me to cover my costs. But if people want to do that, they can. I kind of think if I was buying this as a hobbyist, I think I'd want to pay the full price with the ROM chips, everything on there. And I'll tell you why. Because I would have then a full known working condition to start with, and actually a useful thing. So I've actually used these already. I've used these in my 2 existing Atari STs, and I've got a recent acquisition that I've not really told anybody about because I'm working on that. And I used that to make sure that hardware was up to spec. And it also gave me an idea of what the hardware configuration was. I'll give you an example. Some Ataris don't have the blitter chip installed, so this has a blitter test on it. So it's very easy to check then if your blitter's installed because you passed the blitter test. Things like that. So I quite like that. That was useful. So I'd kind of think for the additional minor cost to the end user, but to the difference it makes in me, because that's the difference between me making a loss or breaking even effectively. I really don't make any profit on these things. Then that's what I would go for. So again, I'm kind of hesitant to, that's a done one. Let's just check that, all done. To sell these without a chip, without chips. And also, if you were going to sell them, maybe there'd be more value to buy them with the sockets already on there. And if you're going to buy them with the sockets on there, do you have 2 sockets or 4 sockets? It's tricky. I could just let people buy their own sockets and solder them on. I think for me, guys, I don't know. I think I'm just about the full made-up board. It just doesn't make sense to me to just be a PCB shipper. But you let me know down below in the comments what you'd think, how you'd want to interact and buy these things. As I said, I just do it to support the channel. There are actually other Atari ST things I've made on the way too. There is the USB power system that's there. That's really quite nice. Funnily enough, I'm still waiting for bill of materials to arrive, whereas some of the Discord, especially the patrons, have early adopters, have they purchased the original run of these boards, so these boards are on there, and as a bonus I included some of the PCBs for some of my other two Atari ST projects, and they're running ahead. I've just like ordered the bill of materials myself for the full lot, but they've already gone and done it. I have been away on vacay, as all the cool kids are calling it apparently, and I just made that up. And in that time they'd just gone ahead and kind of finished my own projects before me, so that's kind of sucks a bit. If you're on the there's Atari ST and ST users group on Facebook. I think it's a closed group actually, so maybe you won't be able to get on there, but there were pictures on there. But go on the Discord and look at my Atari ST room. You can see them in there if you search around, or ping Chrissy, and I'm sure he'll show you. If you're on Twitter, he's got they're on there too, so just look up the Back Office Show on Twitter and you'll probably see pictures. I'm sure I'll have retweeted those because they were really, I was kind of green with envy that somebody else had already beat me to the post. Not really, but it's really cool seeing something working. Now we'll probably do another video like this when I'll assemble some of those, and you can see what goes on and how they work. I'm trying to be very transparent with how these things are assembled and how they work, so that you could either play with them, modify them, and be assured of their operation. Interestingly enough, there was a bit of debate on that USB thing because I decided to put in resettable polyfuses, which are kind of groovy. So they're a fuse device that if there's an overcurrent, the actual unit itself, the fuse itself, will reset when you withdraw power, and I guess it cools down. I'm not sure on the actual full mechanism of how it resets. And I set that to 300 milliamps each for each USB port, which by your quick maths is telling you technically you could be driving up to 900 milliamps out of your ST cartridge port. Which I have to admit, I have no idea if it's capable of doing that. I have no idea if the power supply is capable of doing that, and it's above the specification because the lowest unenumerated USB, or the maximum unenumerated USB current is 100 milliamps. So when you plug in a USB device, it will give 100 milliamps to kind of let the other device that it's there, and you can have 100 milliamps, but until you tell me what you are and negotiate with me how much you want, I'm going to keep you at 100 milliamps. Now, because we don't have any smarts in this USB device, I thought let's just go for the middle ground. Let's give you 300 milliamps, which is a bit more useful things, and you can probably use it for charging all sorts of gadgets and running your Satans and Ultra Satans from it, and see how it goes. So there was some debate over that, people saying, oh, but isn't the minimum 500 milliamps and stuff? It's like, no, that'll be maximum figures. Now what you can do though, if you are concerned and you say, actually I want more current, what you can do is just bypass the polyfuse, or if you don't want to fuse at all, just bypass the polyfuse, just short circuit over that, or if you really want to find another fuse, put a bit of fuse wire in there if you want. It's all up to you. So the next stage, of course, after I do this, so I'm going to do a whole load of these. There is a sort of decoupling capacitor that goes in here. It doesn't really do anything. It doesn't really affect. I might just leave that out in the future ones like this. Test them with it, test them without it. It's absolutely fine. So yeah, we might just leave those off. So what I do is I then make a big pile of these and I put them in a corner, and then I get out my XG ECU Pro, which is a kind of expensive, to be honest, but useful, especially for this programmer for programming the various EEPROM type chips, and these ones are unhappy. I'm getting quite a bad yield, by the way. I don't know where they get these chips from. They look like all brand new chips, never used, but they're faulty, basically. So I seem to be getting 1 in 5 or something at the moment is faulty, which is pretty bad and very expensive. So yeah, I don't know if we're ever going to get a better yield, because I'm not even sure they make these anymore. And I did try to get, I invested in some EEPROM, electrically erasable chips, and they work in the same programmer, and they don't have a window because you erase them by applying certain voltage to the thing. And the darn things are only 8K. So I think these are 64K and the other ones are 8K. So that kind of blows chunks. It means you can't use it. In fact, I'm looking at this. I can almost see little scratches on that window. I wonder if that's what's wrong with it. Anyway, I pop these in my programmer, and then I have to go and load up the software, and then I select the right ROM image. And if initially, if the ROM image isn't the right size, I have to split it over the number of chips. So, for example, if it's 128K and these are 64K chips, I need to split that image into two: a high byte, a high chip, and a low chip, basically. And then I'll program a few of these high, like maybe 5 with the high and then 5 with the low, and then put a little label on each one, make sure we don't get them mixed up, and then pop them on the PCB. And I'll show you how I pop them on the PCB, because then you will be able to do the same, popping on and dismantling. What I do is just check the splayness of the legs. Now these are how they come out the tube, and that's how splayed they are. Let's see if I can fit one without even doing anything. So what I'll do is I'll put in one edge, like the rear edge, and then I'll bend it. Yeah, there you go. Just like that. Boom. No muss, no fuss. So you won't have any problems with that. Now getting them out, on the other hand, is tricky. Now I do have a chip puller somewhere. It's not sitting on the desk next to me. And you might have, but if you don't have a chip puller and you intend to get these out, what I would suggest is put a little screwdriver under one end like this. This is how we used to do it back in the day when we were poor students. And just try to lever one side and then the other, nice and gently. And you can see that's one. This whole row has come out, but this row hasn't. So be very careful and just try not to get any twist on it. If you can't pull it out parallelly, which I'm trying now and it's really not, I'm trying gentle twists, there's a chance that it will give and you're going to end up bending the thing. So what I'd suggest is, again, put the screwdriver in, do the other side, and there you go. They've come out. There's no damage, no twists on that. And that's going back in the tube, because I've got to see what's wrong with my unhappy chips. I'm hoping an erase cycle will sort them out, but we'll see about that. So that's how I do it. I've got 4 boards here that will soon be ready. Please, if you are considering needing a cartridge for your diagnostics for your Atari STs, please consider one of mine, and that'll help me out. If you are considering doing a project where you want to interface to the Atari ST, definitely consider one of these, and let me know in the comments if you think I should populate all 4 with sockets, so that you can put 4 chips and get your Mutant Camels or Buggy Boy on there. So some people have done that, and what I would love to see, guys, anybody who's done that, please make a 3D printed case on Thingiverse so we can have a legitimate Atari ST game cartridge with like Buggy Boy written on it, or a label thing, so we can stick a label. That would look so cool. And I'll show you again from the back. So this is the top part. This is the part that sits, you see when it's inserted into your Atari. So you can see that you actually have access to all of these pins. So what you could do, for example, is you could have your ROM in this ROM bank 4. So there's the low and there's the high. Then you have the ROM bank 3, low and high. What you could do is actually fit sockets onto this side for those. Not to put ROMs in, because it will not be usable for that. But you can actually attach your projects, because you can get your Atari ST through like coding in C or assembler to twiddle these pins, and then that acts as I/O for your actual own hardware. So you could fit something else on there. So I'll give you an example. Here's an ESP module. Okay, so this is an ESP camera module, and it's quite nifty. And you can see it's got its own pins and its own hardware on there. That's the ESP32. And you can code this, for example, to come up with a protocol that can engage with your Atari ST over the port here. I'm not going to say just solder it straight on. That will not work because I've no idea what these pins are. In fact, look, you've got 3V3, 5 volts, ground, and then various IOs, UART and a ground. You know, you might be able to get away with it if it happens to be the power and the grounds are in the right place, but they're not. And actually, look, it doesn't even fit like that. So a bit of VariBoard. You're going to make a little VariBoard daughter board, and you can attach this and attach that to your Atari ST, and bloody hell, program something on the ESP to convert the camera picture into a buffer that can be sent to the Atari ST. That would be amazeballs. If you can do that, I tell you what, I will refund you the cost of your hardware, because that will be such a cool project, right? Wouldn't it? That'd be an amazing thing. I would love to have that on my YouTube. Go and you know, talk to you about that project and put it on. That it'd be a numero uno A-star project, I think, and that's what this is intended for. So I've been speaking for over 20 minutes about this. Thank you so much if you've bared with me this time, and thank you so much for supporting the channel, those of you who've already bought it and those of you who will buy it. Again, any ideas, suggestions, comments down below. Tell me what you want me to blow on these UV things, and I'll pop them on. And if you, of course, want anything custom on yours, maybe when I get my UV eraser I can, because I need to be able to experiment and wipe them if I make a mistake, because there's no way I'm going to program something and send it out to you without testing it, because I don't do that. It has to leave the factory complete and working. So thanks so much again. Please like, share, subscribe, come and chat to me in the Discord, and as ever, thanks for watching.